So now I'd like to introduce you to Keithan Jones. Keithan is the founder and owner of Cmyk, an independent publisher based in San Diego, California. The mantra behind Kid is, "The kid in you never dies." It is a constant reminder that our childhood spirit is at the core of who we really are, no matter how old we get. Keithan was introduced to comics when his dad took him to see the original Star Wars, and as he put it, the experience blew his mind, and he was hooked into the comic culture ever since. However, growing up reading comics, Keithan noticed a lack of ethnic diversity in the stories. None of his favorite characters were Black or the main protagonist. They were the sidekicks at best, and Keithan wanted to change that one day. As he says, I wanted to see legitimate and badass, with two Z's, superheroes of color that appealed to all demographics. And so in 2015, Jones established Kid Comics, and his first publication, The Power Knights, which he originally created in 1982 as a child. So if your kids out there, start the dreaming. He went on to create Black Comics Day, Heroes Rise, a Black History Month celebration of Afrocentric comics and the artists behind them. Keithan regularly features his childhood creations, the Power Knights, at conventions around the country. You can read the Power Knights at kidcomics.com. So Keithan, welcome.
Well, Keithan, thanks for joining us. We're so glad to have you here. I'm going to go off and let Marnie
I'm going to go off as well. I think we're just handing it over to Keithan to take it away, and then I'll come back in a little bit with some Facebook questions.
All right. Thanks for the intro, Marnie. That was great.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So, we lost.
No, you're live. We see you. Go ahead.
Okay, so is Jennifer there?
I'm here just because I wanted to be the voice in your head that no one can see. But yeah, you're live. We can all see you. We can hear you, so you can take it away.
Oh, okay. I know you guys want me to go ahead and speak on all of these different topics about the techniques that I used for my 5 years in business here. So what I thought would be the best way for me to approach this is basically tell you my life story, and in the process of telling you the story of how I got from there to here, the lessons learned will be within this story, and all the techniques that most people will need to be a self-publisher will be within this storyline. And of course, you guys can ask questions anytime you feel you need to. So let me make clear, everyone can hear me, right? Hello?
Yep, you sound great.
Because I feel like I'm here by myself on the moon somewhere.
You know, I know it's disconcerting, isn't it, to just talk into a screen?
Weird, but we're here. I see their name, and it's a big black screen that says Jennifer Thompson here. And I see
where did they go?
In the corner.
We're with you. Just let us know if you need anything.
Okay. I'm so scared. Okay, so Marnie went over a lot of this, so I'm going to break it down. Let's start at the beginning. What got me into comic books? Well, simply, like a lot of artist stories from my generation, I was taken to see Star Wars, right? And from seeing that film, it kind of opened, it was like a key that was placed in my head and just opened up another dimension of ideas and creations that were there, but just needed something needed some type of spark to get them going, to get them to start flowing out, right? Also at the same time, my dad, he was in the Navy, and if you know about people in the Navy, they'll go overseas 6 months at a time, and you wouldn't see him. But when he would come back, he would give me all of his comic books he was reading during that time period. And unknown to him, by him doing that, I got hooked to comic books. And so after seeing Star Wars, that sparked me to create my own comic book. It wasn't my own story or anything. It was just my version of Star Wars. I didn't know anything about how comics were made. I didn't know what Marvel or DC, I saw the names, but I didn't really know what that meant. I kept seeing the names Stan Lee and Jack Kirby all over the place. I knew the names, but I didn't know what they did. So that was my initial experience with comic books. I was just digging the whole format, the artwork, the stories, and everything that was connected to it. And it got me into reading, actually. Like, school books were boring and all that, but when comics came along, I was like, maybe I do like reading. Because comics would have words in there I didn't understand, and it forced me, this is pre-internet, so it forced me to go to the library or find a dictionary to figure out some of the words that were popping up in comic books, okay? So that's my initial spark to get me into this genre. One year in the 6th grade, now this is the story of my actual first book being published or printed. We'll say it's the first book being printed. My 6th grade teacher gave us an assignment. If we could have anything we wanted for Christmas, what would that be? And we were told to write an essay about it. And I wrote to have my comic book published, more or less. And so she, after reading that, she happened to know a local printer here in San Diego, and asked me, or gave me the opportunity to actually have that, be realized. And so right before Christmas, I think it took me about 2 or 3 weeks, I made a Star Wars comic and a sequel to The Empire Strikes Back. And this is that book here. And I titled it When Monsters Pray. And I don't remember how many copies were printed up, but it was enough for me to pass out to my classmates. And they had the Channel 8 News come in, interview me about it, and watch me, and they filmed me passing the book out to my classmates, which at the time was really embarrassing to me. So, but I did it, and that was my first experience of having something that I wrote and drew being published. And this is that book. I have Luke Skywalker here on the cover, and it was called When Monsters Pray. Okay. So, and then, in the process of that, I was in the 6th grade, and I had a little taste of behind the scenes of how books are published. Because I was taken, I think in the middle of the day, I was taken to the print house to actually draw the book during my school hours every day. And so I got introduced to the printing machines and how the printing process worked and all that stuff. And it probably flew through one ear and went out the other. The technical stuff didn't really stick to me. I was just really excited to get to drawing something and seeing it printed. Anyway, the book that I ended up publishing as an adult, as my first actual self-published book, was called The Power Knights. But where did the Power Knights come from? Okay, well, that's the next tier in this story. I was a huge fan of the Teen Titans back in the early 1980s, written by Marv Wolfman and drawn by George Perez, right? Everything about that series, everything about that book excited me. It educated me on storytelling, on page format, on cliffhangers and foreshadowing and everything else that's entailed in writing a good story. I learned a lot of that stuff from reading that series. I didn't understand it all because of my age, but it was my bedrock, my foundation of what I do today. So anyway, after reading Teen Titans, I decided to sit down at 11 years old and create my first issue of The Power Knights, which is this book, right? This is the actual book right here. Drawn in crayon, colored in crayon. Even misspelled Knights. I forgot the K. And my whole thinking at the time was, how can I mimic professional books? And this goes for this goes for adults too. When you call yourself getting into publishing and you want to make your own book as an independent, study the real thing and mimic the real thing, not the stories not the story, but the professionalism of it. So you want to look at why things are where they placed, why things are placed on the cover the way they are, all the legalese and where that's placed, the font styles, the compositions, the choice of colors. As a kid, that's the stuff I was subconsciously absorbing as I studied and looked at the real deal and tried to mimic it, even at this age, 11, with just crayons. So that's where that started. And so I mentioned that to say that even if you're a full-blown adult, you want to be conscious of the fact that you're trying to appear professional, even though you don't have all the answers. You're not technically all the way there yet. You could at least nothing's stopping you from doing the research to figure out how to get to that point. Okay. All right. So I created the Power Nights, and that wasn't anything I tried to get out in the world and, get it published or anything. It was just a project of passion. That was just pure, like I said, the kid in you never dies. That was just pure joy, pure imagination, no expectations, and no overbearing criticism, just doing whatever comes out. So how do I find out about getting into the industry? Well, for a long time, I didn't know Comic-Cons existed until my dad surprised me at the age of 15 by taking me to San Diego Comic-Con, which is here in San Diego. And at that time, it was at the old convention center downtown, right? Much smaller event than it is today. And I think it only cost $10 to get in. And so he took me to that, and I'm walking around, I'm just completely blown away, first of all. Like, what? You mean I can actually meet my not my peers, but my heroes, my favorite writers and favorite artists? Like, they're here, real and tangible. So I figured, oh, okay, so that's what, that's what conventions are for. You get to meet these people. But I also found out it's also a place where you can get work, right? Or you can get your foot in the door. So how do I do that? Well, in talking to people that year, I found out that I needed to have a portfolio put together to show the editors. The editors are the people that do the hiring at these companies. If you wish to work for a publisher, it's the editors you want to build a relationship with. Okay, you can be a jerk to everybody, but don't be a jerk to the editor. That's the guy you want to keep on your team. All right. So the very next year, at the age of 16, being the ambitious person that I am, I gathered all my stuff into this portfolio, what I thought was a portfolio. And I went to San Diego Comic-Con the following year, showed my stuff to Marvel, showed my stuff to DC, showed my stuff to all the little independent companies that were around at that time period. And I got lucky. My stuff was, I never really got any bad criticism from anyone. It was just a lot of keep working at it. You'll get there. You might want to work on this or that a little bit, but you're good and you'll get there eventually. And I'm like, that was great. But at that time I was like, man, I really want to work now. And so I came across a small company called Apple Comics. They looked at my stuff and they were like, so how do you feel about doing an 8-page story for us? A short little insert. I was like, cool, I'll do whatever you guys want me to do. And so they hired me to draw this 8-page Dracula story. I didn't do any writing or anything like that. I was just the guy that drew the pictures, right? I did, this was during the summertime too. The convention was over. I'm at home now and I'm doing this book. And I asked them if I could also ink it, okay? Because in comics, it's usually a team of people that make a comic. You have your writer, you have your penciler, the person that draws the pictures. You have your inker, the person that inks over the pencils, so that the pencils will print nice, sharp, and clearly so that people can see what they're looking at. You have the colorist. You have the letterer. So let's see, that's writer, penciler, inker, colorist, letterer. So that's already 5 people working on a book. And that doesn't even include the editor and all the other staff folks that run the companies, but we're sticking to the book itself. So anyway, I asked to do the inking, and that's where I screwed up. At the time, Photoshop did not exist. The printing techniques weren't as sharp as they are today. The technology just wasn't there for the way I inked the book, and the way I inked the book was very detailed. I got into a lot of little details And they were a little upset with me because at first they weren't going to let me ink, but I convinced them that I could do it. And based on what I showed them in my portfolio, I deviated from what was in my portfolio. I deviated on the actual project they gave me because I figured, oh, I'm really going to embellish these pages with all these ink, details. And in the printing world at that time, a lot of those details I drew would just end up being muddy black blotches on the page because one, it was on newsprint versus a magazine, paper stock, which doesn't absorb the ink as much as newsprint. So they told me the pages looked good, but they were virtually unprintable, and they would have to go in and do a lot of physical editing to the work that I did, and to get it to a point where they can print it. And so, I could hear the dejection in their voice when they were telling me. It's almost like, man, we made a mistake hiring you, And so it is what it is. The book wasn't printed until years later, but it was a lesson for me on the side of the technical aspects of understanding. You can't just be talented and draw a bunch of pretty pictures. You also have to understand what you're doing as it pertains to the finished product. Whether that's the size of your layouts, your printing capabilities. Can I print what I'm doing on the art to the paper? Is that going to transfer? Colors. What type of color limitations do I have? Can I do a full bleed? Meaning, can I draw all the way to the edge of the page? These are things that you have to be aware of when you're publishing comics or any book, really. And those are things you have to research. And sometimes you're just not going to know what you don't know. And that's where mistakes come in, because you're going to make mistakes. And when you make that mistake, that's when you're going to learn. And usually that's a lot, how most people learn. And that's okay. As long as you don't, throw yourself out of the game, just keep swinging away until you hit a home run. And so anyway, moving right along, that was the end of my comic book career as a teenager. And so I got into animation in my last couple of years of high school. And so I applied to go to CalArts, which was the Disney School of Arts, where they trained their animators to learn how to animate and storytell and everything that's entailed with that before they worked for the actual company. And so I got accepted at that school, right? It's called CalArts up in Valencia, California. And at CalArts, I learned tons of things, not only through just animation, but also live action and film or storytelling in general. And the first thing they drilled into our heads was less is more. Less is more. And of course, when I heard that, I reflected back on my comic book debacle. But less was more was the mantra for anything that you did. Like, I interpret that as, whether you guys are writers or artists out there, think about who you're communicating to. What sounds good in your head or what looks good in your head does not necessarily mean it's going to translate in the real world. And if it doesn't translate in the real world, well, your career is going to be short, because people are not going to understand what they're looking at, or they're going to be overwhelmed by too much activity on the page. You want to keep things simple is what I'm saying. Just keep things simple. That's always the best route. It doesn't mean just because someone drew a million things on the page means they're a better artist than you, or if someone wrote a book that's 500 pages versus your 40-page book, that means they're a better writer. What matters is the impact that the audience gets from that work. So, how do you touch someone when you're writing something, whether it's comics or prose? Like, how do you connect with an audience, right? You have an idea, but how do you make that idea connect to your audience? Well, over the years, I've learned that I don't care if you're writing science fiction, if you're writing a biography, if you're writing a cookbook or whatever. The thing that people are going to connect to in your writing is the element that's true, the element that is you. you got to figure out a way to take your life experiences and inject that into your story, whether it's a story about aliens or, like I said, or a story about, I don't know, a lawyer that's fighting the system. You want to inject what you know into the book. And when you do that, the person reading the book is going to subconsciously or spiritually connect to it. They're going to recognize key situations or themes in your writing that they can relate to and be inspired from. Okay? So it's okay if you're writing stuff, fantastical stories like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, or you're writing hard-hitting stories like, I don't know, The Godfather or something like that. Just keep some type of, rooted in some type of reality so that people can relate to it, right? And that's really the key. And when you do that, you will avoid writer's block, because you're not sitting there like thinking of something out of thin air. Oh man, gosh, what city should I put this in? Well, just put it in the city you grew up in. Or what should his friend be like? Well, maybe your best friend or a former friend of yours. Boom, done. You don't have to think about it anymore. Start writing. So you don't sit there and come up with stuff that doesn't exist, or you have no knowledge or experience of, because you're going to be sitting there trying to write something for a long time, and chances are by the time you get done with it, it's not going to relate to anybody. So anyway, I was at Cal Arts. I didn't have enough money to stay at Cal Arts. I ended up getting bounced out of there on my second year because I couldn't pay the tuition. Cal Arts was very expensive. But I was hungry. Like, I really wanted to succeed, whether that's in animation, graphic design, something to do with the arts, and where I can use my talent. Like, so I refused to go back to San Diego. So what I did, I secretly went to class and sat in the back. And I figured I didn't see anyone taking any roll count. So I just figured I'll just sit in the back, don't draw attention to myself, and still, do the assignments. I just wouldn't turn them in. And so that's what I did. Word got out that Keithan was on campus as an unregistered student. So some days I did have to do some ducking and dodging. And, but the other problem was I needed work, right? And like I said, I wanted to stay in my field. So what I did was I secretly went to the school job board which they had in the administration, one of their offices there. I went in there and I would jot down all the job openings, whether it's an animation or graphic design or whatever. And I would call these people up and oh, how did you hear about us? Oh, I'm a student at Cal Arts. Oh, okay. Because I think the school had relationships with some of these companies. And I used to be a Cal Arts student. It wasn't like I was totally lying. So I went and did my interviews, showed my portfolio, which was a lot better than it was when I was 16. And I got these jobs. I would get jobs here and there, get odd jobs here and there. And through that process, I ran into these two older gentlemen who had strong Hollywood connections, right? Now I'm going to talk about pitching. Okay. Through those two guys, I was maybe 20, 21 years old, didn't know anything about anything. But those two gentlemen were older guys who were in the industry. One was a professional writer. He wrote for I cannot remember, but he wrote for one of those television shows back in the days of MASH or something like that. One of those sitcoms. Anyway, the two of them had created a Black superhero project called Black Thunder. And this was the time when Spike Lee was making his bones, when Spike Lee was the hot thing and John Singleton was hot and all. There was this Afrocentric wave happening in the early 90s. People wearing Malcolm X caps and medallions and we had the LA riots. All that stuff was going on in LA, and I was living there at the time. And it was influencing me, just like what's going on today with Black Lives Matter. It was influencing me as a college-age person to divest a lot of my time and energy into either protesting or studying books that Malcolm X wrote, and just I was learning a lot of stuff I wasn't aware of, because it was an awakening for me as a person, as a Black person. And so it was a gift and a curse. I'm like, on one side, this is great. I'm learning about my history. But on the other side, it was distracting me from doing what I needed to do as a professional and learning my craft. So it was almost like I was living two lives. I was torn. But it was what it was. I had to deal with it. I had to survive and be be a strong Black man. But at the same time, like, yo, I need a job. And so anyway, these two guys had connections to all the industries or studios, and they presented Black Thunder to me, and they wanted me to do the visuals for their script. They had wrote a script which they're going to pitch to these different studios. But when I got the image of what they had of this character, it was kind of offensive. The way he looked, he was very stereotypical of Black men at that time, which was, he had the power of sound, right? But the way they drew him was, the way they imagined him was, he was a superhero with a radio, a boombox stuck in his chest. A boombox stuck in his chest. Instead of like Superman has the S, this dude had a radio stuck in his chest. And he would, break dance and rap and all this other stuff. And I'm looking at it like, I'm 21. And I'm like, yo, there's no way I'm going to attach my name to that. That was really lame to me and really really offensive to me. Like, okay, guys, I like the idea that he has the power of sound, but we can't go with this design. And so I redesigned him, made him, he still had the power of sound, but I made him look cool. And I don't have the drawing with me right now, but basically, if you can imagine, I made his outfit look similar to what Batman's looks like in the Dark Knight movie. So it just looked a lot more cool. And so anyway, we went on our pitch meetings. We went to Disney. We went to Warner Brothers. We went to Fox. And I'm talking about not the lower level folks. I'm in the studio. I'm in the meetings with the big dogs, right? I didn't have any power to say anything, though. All I could do was sit there and absorb the meetings and let my partners say things, whether I agree with them or not. And, in a sense, they're representing me. But I didn't have any say-so in anything. So it was always an awkward thing for me to sit there and be in arm's length of these powerful people who could change my life like that and not be able to represent myself. I was just the artist. And they're sitting there talking about Black culture, and I'm looking at them like, really? It's like, what could I do? I'm a kid. And plus, on the chance that we land this pitch, my life has changed anyway. So I'm like, I'm not trying to cause any waves. I'm trying to make this work. And so one time at Warner Brothers, and this is for you writers out there and you people with big dreams to make a movie based on your script. One time at Warner Brothers, we were in the office of what's his name? Jackson. Oh my God, having a brain fart. Doug Jackson. He's no longer alive. Last name was Jackson. He produced the movie New Jack City, House Party, and some other films. And anyway, we're in his office, and we're pitching the story and everything, and he kind of stops us and it's like, you know what, guys, let me show you something. You know how many scripts I get a day? How many times I see stuff come across my desk and what I do with this stuff? He gets up out of his chair, walks over to this closet that's in his office. It was a big office too. Opens it up. That closet was packed packed full of people's scripts that were submitted to him. I don't even know if he read them all. And he said, that's where most of the stuff goes. That's what he told us. That's where most of the stuff goes if I look at it. And so I'm looking at that like, no wonder it's so hard to get for people to get their foot in the door. You don't even know if people are looking at this stuff, Matter of fact, they may just be looking at it just to get ideas for another project. So that's it. I'm only bringing that up just to show you, just to give you guys a taste of what's going on the other side of where your stuff goes, or when you hand your script to these producers and editors and stuff like that. That you're not the only one. So you better put your best foot forward and be on your P's and Q's and be personable and be somebody that they want to be around, because a lot of the time that's really your only leverage is who you are, not what you're doing. So you always want to be a personable person. You always want to be respectable to people that have already made it, because they went through their journey and they took their arrows to get where they are. And if you come along acting like you know everything, you're better than they are, it's a real turnoff. So humble yourself when you come in contact with these people, or your stuff could end up in that closet. So anyway, we got to Dark Horse Comics, and at the time they had a film division, and I think they released a film with Pamela Anderson, something, she was back in the 90s, I forgot the name, Barbarella or something like that, and they were looking to do some more projects, right? And Mike Richardson of Dark Horse, who was the publisher at the time, or the owner of Dark Horse, he really liked my work. He really liked our project. And he's like, great, let's do this. I'll call you guys tomorrow. We'll make a graphic. We'll start with a graphic novel. And then we'll segue into a film script, and then we'll produce the film, whatever. I went home thinking I made it. The very next, I had a restless night, told my mom all this stuff, like, oh man, this is it. Tomorrow we're going to sign the contracts, and I'm off to the races. I did my work. I survived this debacle at CalArts and everything else that went wrong in my life. And I'm on my way. Never heard from the guy again. No return phone. If you call the office, no return phone calls, nothing. And I was between a rock and a hard place, because like I told you, I was partnered up with some older gentlemen who had power over me. I couldn't supersede them, so I could not go around them and contact their contacts. That would be bad business for me and destroy our relationship. So to this day, I don't know what happened, if those guys said something that turned off Dark Horse, or Dark Horse literally didn't want to, had a change of heart for whatever reason that had nothing to do with us. I don't know. But I bring that up to say, don't get overly excited about opportunities. Stay even keel. Do what you need to do, but don't put all your hopes into one basket or one project. And if it doesn't happen, get on the ledge and want to kill yourself over it. There is another day. There is other opportunities. So if the contract's not signed, nothing's happening. Don't get too excited until you actually get a check in your hand or something signed. All right. So let's see, where am I? So I'm feeling dejected a little bit. I kind of started to lose from that point on, and I say the rest of the 90s was kind of up and down. Didn't really know where I was going with my art or my talent or my concept, because in my mind, I thought if I showed my work to an editor, or whether that's writing or art, if I didn't get hired that day or that week, I wasn't good enough. That's the way I internalized everything. I didn't understand that sometimes you're great, but you're not right for that project. Sometimes there's systems in the background at the company that are happening that you're not aware of, and they're not privy to tell you. So don't always take everything personal. And I was taking it personal. But the way I was taking it was, oh, I guess I'm just not good enough. And so I would just try to get better. But that was not necessarily the case. And I wasted a lot of energy and bad thoughts on that. And this is me looking at it in hindsight. So never lose confidence in your abilities. And that does not mean that, don't think like, oh, well, I know everything and I'm the best, but don't think of yourself as being better than another artist, a better writer, a better artist than the next guy or the next lady. Think of yourself as being the best you can be. Like, I do what I do, and it's great. They do what they do, and it's great. And there's enough pie for everyone to share. Like, no one goes to the same restaurant every day, guys. Like, some days I want Japanese, some days I want Italian, some days I want a burger. So, and it's all good. So don't think that the audience is out there just because they're in, uh, just because superhero films are the big thing going on right now, that everybody wants to watch superhero films, or the people who watch superhero films only want to watch superhero films. So don't fall into that trap of doing what's hot at the moment, because by the time you're done with that project, the zeitgeist has moved on to the next thing. But the way to keep yourself in the game is stick to your guns, do it to the best of your ability, and be your biggest fan. So don't worry about the skill level of the artist next to you. That means nothing. What matters is what you're doing, because when you put your work out there and someone's looking at it, they're looking at your work. They don't have like another set of eyeballs that can look at someone else's work at the same time. So do what you do and represent for yourself. Okay. I want to leave enough time for you guys to have your Q&A. So I'm gonna wrap this up a little bit. See what the hell. So yeah. So anyway, I'm doing a bunch of odd jobs, and the only way that keeps me out of getting into trouble, doing stuff that's like taking chances with my life, whether that's drugs, alcohol, gangs, anything that a young person can find themselves into because they don't have anything else going on in their life. My art kept me away from all that stuff. I would never put myself in a position that jeopardized my future, no matter what it was. But I worked every job you can imagine, from digging holes to working at a warehouse to working at fast food, anything to keep money coming in, but never losing sight of my goal, which brings me to one of my lower points where I had no job. I was living in the storage room of my mother's dress store. She had a small dress store here in San Diego, where she was trying out. It wasn't anything big. It was, anything major, but it was hers. And she let me stay in the storage room because that's the only space she had for me. And I'm, of course, that was a secret, and I didn't let anyone know that that's where I was living while I was going about my business. And so I'm thinking, like, how in the hell did I go from winning art awards, being at CalArts, going to high level pitch meetings, to ending up in a damn warehouse? Or not a warehouse, not even a warehouse, a closet, really, a closet. And so there I was, right? And I didn't have any computer skills at this time either. And so it so happens, because I still wanted to be this professional artist, right? It so happens that a professional artist who worked for Tony Gwynn and his wife. If you don't know who Tony Gwynn is, he's passed on now, but he was a famous baseball player that played for the San Diego Padres. It so happened that the artist that worked for his marketing company came into the drugstore, struck up a conversation with my mother. My mother told him that I was an artist as well. And he said, "Oh yeah, let me see his stuff." And so I got my scraps of art that was with me, showed him that. And you have any computer skills? Not really. I've been messing around with Microsoft Paint, right? And so he saw that, took all that with him, or I think I gave him a copy or something. No, he didn't take anything with him. He went back and told Tony Gwynn's wife about me and my situation, right? The very next day, her brother came and picked me up and took me to the big house, took me to their house. And she's sitting there kind of like a Godfather scene, she's like, "You want to work for me?" "Yeah." Yeah. When can you work?" Anytime you want. You want to start tomorrow? Yes. And it was just like that. Boom. Staying in the closet. All of a sudden, I have my very first full-time job as a graphic designer. No computer skills. Company willing to train me on the job. And that's where I learned Photoshop, Illustrator, and screen printing. Okay. And I still reflect back on that time and like, what are the odds? And the only thing I could chalk it up to is like a belief in yourself and having a vision of where you want to be in life and sticking to that vision, no matter how dark it gets in your life, because the universe will eventually open up for you. Now, it doesn't mean sit there like a bump on the log and wait for something to happen. You still have to apply yourself, whether that's submitting your art, drawing, practicing. Do something that gets the universe to open up for you and to bring people in your life. You have to do that. Okay. So there I was. I got my first professional job as a graphic designer. I'm learning the digital side of it for the first time, learning a ton of stuff, making a ton of mistakes, but I'm luckily, thank God, I'm in a position where they tolerated my mistakes. Okay. Whereas another company, hey man, we need you to know what you need to know now, or you're fired, which is most of the time. I was blessed enough to fall into a situation where they were patient and understood my situation, although they still needed this stuff done. So they would get on me every once in a while. Fast forward a little bit. I'm going to speak on prioritizing. I worked at it was called Gwyn Sport. I worked there for a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. And then I decided to move on, and I needed a change of scenery, I guess. And I wanted to go to New York and see if I become this big famous artist. I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to be this great artist, and I'm going to be like Basquiat or somebody like that. I'm going to be, Norman Rockwell, whatever. I'm going to New York and I'm going to be this big artist. I only had like $500 to my name. And this was back in like the late 90s or mid 90s. $500, got on the bus, Greyhound, got on the Greyhound, went to New York, didn't know a single person in New York, never used a subway in my life, didn't know anything about New York. When I got off the bus, I thought I was in another country, because in New York, there's so many different type of people mingling around that they look like, for instance, you see someone that looks black, but when they talk, it's a whole other language. Says, oh, I thought he was black. He's not black. Someone white, you think they're, regular old white person. Nope. This guy's from Italy or something like that. So that was kind of a culture shock, but not really, because in California, it's kind of like that too. So it didn't take me long to adjust. So remember, I went to New York to be this artist. I had my portfolio on $500, staying at the YMCA and paying rent at the YMCA every week like a fool. No job. Going to Manhattan, going to art studios, going to graphic design studios, showing my work. But as you guys all know, nobody hired you the day of. They always need, we'll call you, we'll look at your stuff, we'll call you back. I should have went and got a job so that I can continue to pay my rent, but I didn't prioritize that. I put my dreams above practicality. I wasn't being practical. I let my dream overshadow my common sense. I should have just got a job that paid the rent and then go and pitch my stuff on my free days or whatever. And I didn't do that. And I ran out of money and got the job when I ran out of money. But by the time I ran out of money and got the job, I wasn't going to get a bit. I got kicked out of the YMCA. So I was homeless in New York for a day or two. And that was that. And that was a lesson of me. For me, that lesson was learning how to prioritize my dreams versus what needed to be done at the present time. So, be practical. Don't be foolish. Follow your dream, but don't be naive about it. You still have to eat. You still have to pay your bills. So it's a balance. Is what I'm saying. It's a balance, And at that time and at that age, my eyes were too big. So anyway, and there's more to that story. I might actually make a comic book out of that story because a whole lot of stuff happened in New York you guys won't believe. Let's see here. All right, so let's fast forward here so we can get to these questions. So I go back. I went to Memphis for a year, which is I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, by the way. Shout out to my family in Memphis, Tennessee. I think I got all of my foundation as a person living with my grandparents at the time, because they would take me to church every Sunday, even if I didn't want to go. And usually I didn't want to go, but it gave me my foundation on how I treat people. I try to treat everybody with kindness. I try to judge people based on what they do, not what they say. I'm not into the whole pitting races against each other. I'm not into the whole racism thing and all that stuff. That was always it's always disappointing when I see stories about racism and just the dynamics that's going on in this country. And like Marnie mentioned in her introduction to me, one of the things I noticed in comic books, mainstream comics, was that none of my heroes, the guys I admired my favorite heroes, were not Black. None of them. Han Solo was my favorite Star Wars character. He's not Black. Spider-Man was my favorite comic book. Peter Parker's not Black. Superman, and on down the line. There was generally white males. And I love those characters. I love all those characters, but I felt that I didn't have any characters that reflected me as, that looked like me or came from where I came from. So fast forwarding to the creation of Kid Comics, I was working at a company here in San Diego called, I always have these brain farts, Success Advertising. Great company, treated me well. I was super comfortable. I had my own office, everything. No one really bothered me, and they just let me do my thing. And I worked there for about 7 years, but this voice in my head kept saying, "It's time to go. It's time to go." Just like Jennifer's like looking at me, and she's like, "Well, you better speed it up, buddy. We got people to get to now."
No, not at all. I want you finish. I'm just here to be with you, and then we have lots of questions for you.
At that time period, working at Success for Advertising, first of all, they were a marketing company. They did advertising, what they call recruitment advertising, where we were in charge of, for instance, if a hospital needed to hire nurses or doctors in their region, like say what's in Texas somewhere, they needed to create an ad campaign that would appeal to potential employees or doctors or nurses to move and work in that location, right? And I would get the script, I would get all the graphic elements, and say, "Okay, Keithan, make it look pretty," basically. So in those years, I learned that the client is the final judgment on anything you do. And you know how they say the client is always right. Even when they're not right, they're right. Because they're the people that paid you to do the job. And I learned that it's weird. I would get these assignments, and the very first thing I did the very first design I would do for folks would be the design, obviously, that I think is best. But of course, they want me to do 3 or 4 more, right? And I'll do that, and they'll tear apart that first design. And well, can't you put the logo in the middle? But there's a person's face there. Yeah, but just put the logo. But it's not gonna. No. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, after a month or so working with this client or a couple of weeks, they always go back to the first design. Always. Maybe a few adjustments here and there.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to keep your composure, talk to them with respect, even when you totally don't agree with them. And you learn how to negotiate your price. I'm working at that company. I learned how to negotiate my price, how to talk to vendors, how real publishing works, how to set up your files properly. whether when you're by yourself, it's okay to have your stuff all over the place on the desktop. But if you work it with a team, organization is key because you have to share files and stuff. So you want to have the proper file formats. You want to understand resolution when you print, or the difference between Cmyk versus RGB. And I see a lot of this stuff from indie people when I see their books. You guys were talking about it in the other panels. You see a lot of crap. And it's not that the idea is crap. It's the presentation part of it. It's the P's and Q's. Okay, this page is this size. Your next page is the other size. You got one font size here, another font size here. You have purple in this page all over the place, and pink on the other page. And what happened to the purple? Oh well, I got hungry that day, and I just need to get it done. Dude, nobody cares about what happened to you in your personal life. They don't know what you're going through in your personal life when you're making your books. They don't, and they don't care because they got their own problems. They're buying your stuff so they can escape their problems and be entertained. So it's not your job to bring your problems to them to make excuses for your poor presentation. Your job is to talk to your spouse about that stuff or your friends and be professional when you're talking to your potential clients or your fans. So it's a balance you have to keep, and I see it online a lot too. And this is one of my final points. It's like, because I didn't even get into marketing, but this is part of marketing, is the way you present yourself. When you guys are online talking crap all day long about somebody, the professional people that you wish to work for are watching and listening to this stuff too. They're making a choice off of the stuff you post. Like, do I really want to work with this person? I mean, he or she is very talented, but man, I don't want to go, I don't want to piss them off because they might put all my business out in the street or, make the company look bad, So you just that's a part of growing up, understand what battles to pick, and just being professional. Like, you cannot always wear your feelings on your shoulders like that and expect to get somewhere in the professional world. It's okay if you're out there, you don't have I'm an artist and I don't care what anyone thinks. Well, fine. Remember you said that, and remember this, that the reaction you get from your words or your art, that. Be prepared for that. Don't complain about it because you've already made that mantra. I'm an artist. I do whatever I want. Okay, well, do that. But don't expect to make the same amount of money or have the same success as the guy who wants to get into the commercial side of things. Because that's the difference. He's over here making deals with whoever, one of these big companies, and you're the art person who's got the smaller crowd, and maybe that's fine for you. If that's fine for you, all more power to you. Just understand, don't expect what you didn't set up. So, yeah, there's other stuff I could talk about, but that's the nuts and bolts, basically what I want to get across today. And hopefully you guys got some information or inspiration.
Keithan, I hadn't heard your whole story before, and I got to say I'm a little blown away. My favorite part is sneaking into class. Like being so hungry that you're like, I'm just going to go anyway. Like that's right. when you're hungry as a storyteller, like it's really good to hear that, like, you make it happen no matter what you have to do. You go out there, you believe in it. If you have to live in a closet for a little while or sneak into the back of the room, you make it happen. And now here you are, you've been a comic book publisher for, is it 5 years going on 6 now?
Yeah, 5 years going on 6.
Awesome. And I just, I'm so inspired by your story. And I remember last year when you were on a panel, you were talking about, believe, you have passions that you believe in, and don't give up on those. Like, stick to your guns. And I love the fact that you went through like the Hollywood thing and like being in those offices in Hollywood, and what you really wanted to do is create your own characters. And you did. Yeah. And to the point that, you wanted to see characters that look like you, right? That story about the sound, the boombox, like, oh my God, I almost wanted to jump in with you and like,
the story.
Like, really? But it's so important. And I feel like we're at a time right now in society where we're finally getting to the point.
Not to cut you off, but
yeah,
those guys, they weren't being malicious when they did that.
No,
They
right,
just
right.
didn't,
They didn't know.
yeah, they weren't, but if I fault them for anything is, what's the word? The hubris of it all, thinking that you know what you don't know. I mean, you're talking about a coach. It's not like saying that you know math better than someone. You're talking about someone's culture, and you're just you're running off of stereotypes, and that's the part that I caution people against. Like, don't just walk into someone's house and tell them about their own house.
Right. Well, exactly. And I think we're finally getting to a point where we're having some really authentic voices, and it's so necessary, it's so needed, and it's so time. You know, it's so important for our readers, it's important for our storytellers, and as a community, I mean, storytelling builds empathy and it helps you learn about other cultures and other people, and that's so important. So I thank you and I applaud you, and thank you for coming and sharing your story. It's awesome. But if you have any final points, I mean, we have a ton of questions about probably some marketing and comic book. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we jump into questions?
Yeah, I guess, and as far as starting kid, you're right. I had visions of injecting characters that reflected me or my friends more in the industry that we love, because we love the characters. We're not asking for Marvel to make Captain America black, even though I know they're about to, but we're not asking for that. We're not asking for these characters' ethnicities to be changed. We're just asking for the same machine that's behind those characters. It'd be great to have that same machine behind characters of color. That's
Luke
it.
Cage.
And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we'll try again. You know? But at least it's there.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's slowly but surely, right?
Right.
I do feel like it's starting to happen. I saw Luke Cage. It was turned into a Netflix show about, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And I love Luke Cage. I'm not a huge comic book reader. That's the truth. But I love superheroes and I love superhero movies and series. Right. And Luke Cage is one of my favorite characters. Awesome. Yeah, he was fantastic. And in fact, I think they might be coming out with another season. I'm hoping. Let's get to some questions.
We have Disney Plus now, so there's a whole, I don't know how that's working now, but I think they migrated all of that stuff, the Marvel and Disney stuff, to Disney Plus. And with COVID putting the brakes on everything,
everything's slowed down.
Because I think they're supposed to have like new stuff coming out under Disney Plus, but yeah.
We talked about this. The movie industry is like on its head, right? So like they can't film. There's so much they can't do. So we're all sort of just waiting. And to your point,
running out of I don't know about you, but I'm out of content to watch. I'm too.
I am too.
You know what's weird? What's weird is that it's actually making me go back to reading more. Reading more books. Like, it's like, because you can only watch so many Netflix shows, and after a while, you're just like, even though there's something new on there, it's like I need to switch it up. Let me start reading some books again.
Totally. I'm right there with you. I've been reading a ton. I have a huge stack next to my bed.
And that's good because a lot of writers and artists out there are like, man, what's happening with books? Are people even interested in books anymore? And I'm like,
oh, yes, they are.
Yeah, they are. But, you don't get the same publicity as a film.
Well, let's talk about pairing, getting the right artist. So if you are a comic book writer, how do you connect to an artist? How do you find an artist?
Finding an artist? Well, there's DeviantArt, deviantart.com. You can find an artist there. And a lot of those artists are looking to be attached to a project. There's Facebook groups, Punch In comic book Facebook groups. A lot of artists are all day long posting their artwork. Some are working, some aren't working. But you as the writer need to figure out what type of artist you need. And that's the hard part. Finding out, because if you're writing a heavy story about a heavy subject matter, you probably don't want to get a guy that draws like Disney. You know what I mean? Right. Like, you don't want he may draw well, but he may not be right for your particular project. Okay. The other thing is, do some research on the artist that you chose. See if there's any news about him being flaky or her being flaky with their work, because that's going to impact your business. I've had stories about personally. ran into some issues like that, which is why I do a lot of the stuff myself. I just happen to be able to do a lot of that stuff myself.
You do both. You
Yeah,
write and you create the visuals.
I do everything, but I'm getting to the age where I don't want to do everything because I don't have the energy or time to do everything. So currently I'm training my baby brother how to take some of the behind the scenes chores off my hands.
Cool.
So he's coming along well. And eventually I want to get to the point where I'm a producer, where I can find someone on Facebook or DeviantArt or wherever, and like, hey, I like your vision, I like your project. Let me bring it under Kid, and I'll fund it for you and train you up on your weaknesses, and get you out there. You know, that's where I see myself going eventually one day.
Now, I would imagine that anyone who is looking to find a publisher for their comic book should start following you now, because if that's happening in the future, they need to engage with you now and start networking with you. So tell us how people can find you just real quick, and we'll throw it in the comment section too.
Well, I'm on all the social, well, not all of them, but the main social media platforms. KJ, what is it? Kid? I don't even know my own thing. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. And I'm on Instagram. KJ KidCom, I believe, is Instagram, and Kid Comics KJ is Twitter. You just punch my name, Keithan Jones, for Facebook, or Kid Comics Online Facebook Kid Comics Online. My main hub where people can buy my books is kid-comics.com. That's where I sell my stuff or make announcements about any major events I'm going to be a part of, like Black Comics Day.
Kid-comics.com. Okay. Yeah. We have another question from Aaron Nabis, or I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but Aaron Navis. How do you build your own community? What are some tips to connect with potential readers and keep them?
How do I build my own community?
Mm-hmm. How? I think you're talking about community of readers. How do you build a potential of community readers? I think it's an organic thing that develops if you're persistent about putting your stuff out there, letting people see your behind the scenes progress, making comments on comic book groups and on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But it's a matter of, they don't know you if you don't put anything out, right? Like, they don't know what they can't see. Mm-hmm. So whether that's going to comic conventions, going to comic book stores, doing signings, do all of that. I've been to store signings where one person showed up. Right. Do it anyway.
Yeah. Because it's out of my power. I don't know what the owner of the store is doing to advertise it. Because a lot of the time when there's poor showings at these shows, it's not because of there's something wrong with your art. I think a lot of artists internalize that. I suck.
Totally.
It's not you. It's the person that organized it that didn't get the word out. That's all it is.
And it could just be something random that happened, that you're competing with something really big.
That too, but that falls back on organizing, right? Like, well, why did you schedule it on Mother's Day?
Totally unrelated.
Like that. Mother's Day?
That's actually how I found you, as you were giving a talk at one of the local libraries, and you were doing a panel, actually.
Right.
So that's how I found you. So absolutely doing events. We have another kind of a cool question here. With comic books like The Boys, we see the anti-superheroes becoming popular. Is this a long-term trend, or is this just a wave, do you think?
It's not anything new, first of all.
Okay.
You see today, this has been done before. Anti-superheroes, so I guess you could say that about Watchmen too? Isn't The Boys something like a version of Watchmen? I haven't seen The Boys. I think I saw the trailer.
I've seen it. It's I think it's British, if I remember.
Why would you say that's a trend, though? I
think, people are getting more into, the idea of the anti-superheroes. So maybe for us who were not so steeped in the comic book world, we see it as something new, but apparently not.
Anti-heroes?
Yeah, anti-superheroes.
Anti-heroes, but not superheroes.
Right. Superheroes weren't like,
wait a minute.
Right. So superheroes weren't out there saving the world necessarily, but right, exactly.
Yeah, we had a lot of that in the 80s when Frank Miller came onto the scene. He did a lot of that in Daredevil, and which led up to Dark Knight, which led and Watchmen, and a lot of. I feel two ways about that stuff. on one hand, it's interesting to a point. I'll take Watchmen, for instance. Like, I like Watchmen, but I'm not like, oh, Watchmen. I'm not that guy, because I'm like, I know superheroes are silly.
Right.
I know this wouldn't work in reality. I already figured that much out. I'm just escaping into this. I need an escape. I don't really necessarily read comics to know about the stuff that's going on in the world today. Like, put elements of in there, but if it's actually about that, and it drones on and on and on, the world is dark and bloody, and men hang themselves from the lights, and their shadows covered, and the whole book is like that, issue after issue. I'm like, all right, can I go to the party now?
You know what? You're absolutely right. And romance is one of the most popular. It's the most popular genre out there because people want a happy ending. They want to know that the story is going to be positive because they already had a bad day at work. They don't need to have it on the page. Well, we have another question.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
People are always comparing the Marvel films to the Warner Brother films. Why is the Marvel movies working and Warner Bros. Is not having the same success, right? Well, I think the main ingredient that they figured out is balance. You're going to get laughs, you're going to get drama, you're going to get action. It covers all bases, but it doesn't go too far either way. So you get a full plate. You see, you may like one character better than another, but as far as the presentation, it's satisfying. Whereas I think you take a film like Superman versus Batman, I think if you ask me what was wrong with that film, me personally, Superman was wrong. Batman was perfect, but Superman was also Batman, which there was no synergy there. It's like they both can't be mad. Both can't be the brooding hero. Superman represented the light, Batman represented the darkness, and Batman should have learned lessons from Superman's demeanor. And Superman should have learned lessons from because Superman was naive in a way about society and, hey, everybody get along, da, 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 da. And Batman should have been the guy who said, hey, man, that's not life for everyone. This is what's really going on, you know? But they both were mad, and they both were dark, and they both were like tearing up the city. So
I think we can learn a lot
in the way that was presented, you know?
I agree with you. I mean, I think we can learn a lot. Like, I think our anti-heroes, our antagonists are just as important in storytelling as the heroes are. And I think that's what you're trying to say. We're getting really close to running out of time, and I have a couple more questions. How big has digital publishing of comic books gotten? How big has it gotten compared to traditional print publishing? And are both companies doing comic and regular books simultaneously?
Are both companies?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely. How big has digital publishing of comic
books
they're basically asking
what's the ratio of digital versus print. I don't really know what the numbers are. I'm going to say most people still prefer physical copies, print versions.
Especially in comic books, you think?
Yeah, comics. Although I've run across a few people who exclusively only buy digital because it's easier for them. They don't have to catalog their books and take up physical space in their house or whatever. But to me, the experience is completely different. I tried it. I couldn't do it. It's like, I need the physical version. I'm from the school of packaging. I love books.
Totally.
I love the smell of paper. I love the binding. I love all of that.
Yeah, I do
digital
too.
is just
yeah.
There it is.
That might be our age, though. That might be our age, because I'm with you. Like, I really want to
say that. I used to say that, but I don't think that's the case because I asked my daughter, and she's 13 now, but when she was like 10 or 9 or 10 years old, she was like, I like print books.
Yeah,
I still prefer the print books. It's a different experience. It
totally is.
Yeah, it's not that digital isn't a good experience. It's a different experience, and I think comic books, you get the full impact when it's printed, because we make those double page spreads for a reason.
Totally.
Double page spreads is not the same when you see it digitally, because all the pages are the same when it's digital.
That's a good point.
And then I got to sit there and zoom in, and then part of the picture's cropped off because I zoomed in, and it's just no. It's just different.
So Here's an interesting question. Do you do or offer any special editions of your comics?
I will be once I finish the last issue. I'm working on the final story or issue of this first story arc. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trade paperback the whole entire series into a special edition where you get the issues you already have, but each one of those issues that you already have will be enhanced with new paint, new fresh paint of coat of paint.
Coat of paint,
and some supplemental material. And of course, you get the final chapter included with that. And so I don't want to reissue exactly what you already have.
Right.
So if you're interested in, recollecting some of the stuff you already have, at least you're going to get some new material along with that, with those previous issues. So yes, there'll be some doodads.
Like foil stamping and that kind of thing. I do that. That gets to be expensive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So there's another question I think is kind of interesting. What do you wish you could see more publishers doing to advance the art form?
That's a good question. To advance the art form. There's so many things have been tried in comics already. And some of that stuff has flown under the radar because comics is kind of on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to pop entertainment. The movies are super big, but their counterparts, the comics, are nowhere near that type of success. Although they were back in the 90s when the Image guys, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, and those guys, when they broke off from Marvel and did their exodus and did their revolution, those guys were selling millions of copies every month, each one of them. That was crazy.
What do you think was happening there?
Well,
why do you think that was?
Marvel had this mantra of that it's the characters that sell the books, not the artists. And they didn't care how popular you were. They didn't want you to get the big head and get out of control. And anything that you created, they owned. So a lot of those guys were creating characters to fit the stories that they were drawing, but they could not financially benefit from that stuff. So they had enough. This is crazy. All of their top 5 artists, I forgot the numbers, I think it was 5, took off and started their own company as a group and called it Image Comics. And they were already selling millions of copies at Marvel, except they didn't have any say-so of what they were drawing or earning the benefits of the success financially. And so they took off, formed their own squad called Image, create our own books. Everyone owned their own material. We just published under this banner. And they were selling like hotcakes. They went to conventions, to comic book stores, lines around the block. Wow. It was nuts. And so the bubble burst on that because it was also a speculative market that people were buying multiple issues because at the time people believed that they could resell the book at a higher value.
Oh, right.
And that whole bubble popped.
Right.
And Image is still around, but that was the end of that action, that whole frenzy that was going on. And that's where Walking Dead came from, matter of fact. Not that era, but he was the next wave. What's his name that created Walking Dead? He's an Image partner.
Well, we had Scott Gimple at day one, who is one of the head writers and the producer.
Yeah, that's right. So he knows what I'm talking about.
Well, Keithan, I think we're out of time, but I just want to thank you for sharing your story and for sharing your inspiration and encouraging writers.
I didn't answer that last question though.
Answer it.
I don't know.
I don't know. I thought
I don't know. I mean, advance the art form. I think the art form is not so much you're advancing the art form. I think what comics need to do to close this all out is comics need to let go of the past. That's what I want to say. They need to let go of the way things were done. Stop fighting change because there's groups out there, which I'm not going to name, that are at odds with what's going on with the diversity movement. They don't agree with the way it's being done. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Make your book, put it out there, let the other artists and writers do whether it's a woman, you don't like women, all right, you don't like women. I don't like peanut butter. So what? Put your stuff out.
Not everyone would agree with you. Yeah, that's a challenge.
There's room for every type of book out there. Take a page from the Japanese when they make manga. They have mangas about everything you could think of. All right, there's a fan for all you artists out there. You all have fans. You just have to find your fans and allow them to find you. You can't find fans if you over here with your arms crossed with a frown on your face, not talking to anybody. It doesn't work that way. And that's all I got to say about that.
Well, I think that's good advice to end on. You know, get your work out there, believe in what you're doing. If you're passionate about it, there's always a way. Even if you have to sit in the back of the classroom, sneak onto campus.
Yeah, don't get caught.
Don't get caught.
Jump out the window like I did.
Thank you so much. And I hope people will check out your comics and continue to follow you. I know we have a lot coming from you, a lot we can follow you in the next coming years. There's going to be a lot of things happening. So we'll be watching you.
I'll be a special guest at if San Diego Comic-Con next year, when they open up again, I will be featured as a special guest for San Diego Comic-Con. So look out for me there.
Awesome. And please,
Black Comics Day.
Good. When is Black Comics Day?
It's usually scheduled once a year, every February for Black History Month. Right now, it may not happen this following year because of COVID and all the regulations we have to follow, which is fine. It's okay. We can do it when we can. But generally, yes, it's every Black History Month and on a day in February, and those days alternate.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll probably see you next year.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
All right. Thanks, Keithan.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.